Today we're going to compare the DJI FPV camera to the GoPro and see which one is more cinematic. Let's go. Hey drone pros, how's it going? Today we've got the DJI FPV. I've been flying this thing for 2 weeks. Just testing it out, seeing what its weaknesses are, what its strengths are. This drone is freaking amazing. If you're just getting into flying FPV and you want kind of a safer way to do that, this is the way to do it. If you don't want to have to solder, if you don't want to have to put together boards and updates and all kinds of stuff, this is the solution for you. But how does the camera stack up to what's already out there in the FPV world? Today we're gonna find out. Okay guys, just a quick disclaimer. Anything you do to your drone, do so at your own risk. So after tons of experimentation and research, I settled on using the GoPro 8 for our test. The GoPro 9 I have as well, but it's a little bit heavier. It's really kind of the same quality as the GoPro 8. So we're using the GoPro 8 for this test. This test is not apples to apples, which 4K is better and so on. It's more of which one can give you the best cinematic results that we've been used to seeing in the FPV world. Okay guys, the first thing up is frame rate. Ideally, you want to be able to film at 24 frames per second if you're not shooting in slow motion, because this is the frame rate that motion picture films film on that gets you that really good cinematic look. The lowest frame rate that the DJI FPV drone goes at the moment is 50 frames per second. So it's going to give you that news type look unless you're shooting slow motion type footage. But with the GoPro, we can lock in that 24 frames per second sweet spot. So that's a win for the GoPro. Okay, next up is shutter speed. In order to get that really cool cinematic motion blur, you need to lock in your shutter at double the speed of your frame rate. So for example, the DJI FPV drone would want to have a 1/20th of a shutter, since 120 is double 60 frames per second. And to slow down your shutter, since there's no aperture, you're going to use ND filters. I bought the ND kit from Freewell and it works really well. For the GoPro 8, I bought an ND filter kit and I use an ND32 for bright daylight. You could also go a little bit higher than that if you need to. I then locked the shutter speed at 1/48, since that's double 24 frames per second. Luckily, you can lock the shutter speed on both options, so I'd say that is a tie in this category. Okay guys, next up is the field of view. This is how wide the camera angle sees, and it really plays an important role in making things look like you're farther away than they really are, or just making them look very cool. So the DJI FPV drone has a 14.6 millimeter lens, which is pretty wide. For the GoPro, the best option is to shoot at 4K in the 4:3 mode, and once you stabilize it, which we'll cover in a little bit, it crops it to a 16:9, and it's still wider than the DJI lens. The wider lens just gives you that true FPV feel and a greater sense of speed and proximity. So I'd say the GoPro wins here. Next up is the picture profile. DJI has a flat profile option called Cine-like, so I turn this on. And GoPro has a flat option, so you can turn that on to get more dynamic range. When I look at them side by side, it looks to me that there's more detail, more dynamic range in the GoPro footage. So I'd say that overall, GoPro wins here. Next up is sharpness. Usually the best rule of thumb is to turn off all sharpness on your device that you're recording on so that you can apply it in post. The DJI FPV drone has no ability to turn off the sharpness, so you've got this baked in sharpness look. With the GoPro, you can turn the sharpness to the low setting, and then you can add your sharpness in post. So the GoPro wins this round. All right, now let's compare them side by side. Let's zoom in 500%. As you can see, DJI looks more sharp, but as you remember, we turned off the sharpening on the GoPro, so we're gonna add some in post. Now the GoPro is equally as sharp as the DJI, and you can also tell that the DJI footage is much more noisy compared to the GoPro. So I'd say GoPro wins out on sharpness abilities and noise. Next up is stabilization. The DJI FPV drone has built-in stabilization called Reelsteady, or EIS, so I turn that on. And on the GoPro, they have a stabilization called Hypersmooth. Now I turn this off. So the cool thing about GoPro is that there's a company called Reelsteady, and for years they've been the absolute best way to stabilize GoPro footage. Better than anything else that you've ever seen. But what is the difference between, say, Warp Stabilizer in Premiere? Instead of stabilizing using what is seen on the screen, it's stabilized using the gyro data recorded onto your GoPro footage. So this means you get absolutely perfect stabilization on your GoPro FPV videos. This is what all the top FPV guys uses. This is the industry standard, but GoPro actually bought them last year and they created a special GoPro firmware to make Reelsteady work even better. The firmware is free, it's easy to install, it's called GoPro Labs. You can get Reelsteady Go for $99, and from the comparisons with Reelsteady Go and the GoPro versus Rocksteady and the DJI, I feel like the GoPro is much more smoother. It just works very, very well. So I feel like the GoPro with Reelsteady Go is the winner here. Next up is bitrate. Bitrate is how much data you can record per second to your card. Typically, the higher the number, the more you can recover your highlights, you can boost up your shadows, and make the most of your footage. The DJI FPV Drone comes in at 120 megabits per second, and the GoPro has a bitrate of 100 megabits per second. Okay, so overall, even though the DJI FPV Drone has a little bit of a higher bitrate, I think the overall image, the cinematic quality of the GoPro is the definite winner here. So overall, I'd say that the GoPro wins in color, sharpness, clarity, field of view, and cinematic quality. But when you strap it onto this bad boy, it becomes a long range, super long flight time beast with lots of safety features and a great way to get into FPV. You might say, well, how does it fly having the extra weight on top? Honestly, I can't even notice a difference. I can do power loops, I can do rolls. I just might get a few minutes shorter flight time. So hopefully this video helps you guys out. Honestly, the camera needs some work. Hopefully DJI will come out with one we can stick in here, or maybe the next platform will have a better cinematic option. But for now, my GoPro is going to live on the top of this drone, and it's a super amazing setup, even if it might void the warranty. And if you want to know the exact settings that I use to get my drone to fly super smoothly, to get my camera to shoot amazing footage, and also links to everything that I use for this stuff, just click the link in the description and you can sign up for my free drone course that includes the FPV training as well as good training for other camera drones. Also, if you want to see more videos like this one, hit the subscribe button and the bell and we'll let you know when we post our next one. That's it, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you later.